Titus Manlius Torquatus entered Roman history as one of the exemplary generals. The first time he was famous as a warrior who defeated a Gaul in single combat. The second was when he executed his son for disobeying an order. The future commander came from a noble family Manlii, who gave Rome a number of generals and politicians. His father, Lucius Manlius, earned the nickname Imperiosus, which translates as self-possessed. Lucius Manlius was known for his harshness in recruiting troops. The commander ordered those who evaded conscription to the legion to be whipped and sent to prison. Titus Manlius himself, as a young man, learned the temper of his father. The young man was characterized by his eloquence. His father ordered to expel his son from the city and send him to the village, where the young man had to work hard. Probably, harshness towards relatives became a family trait of the Manlius. The exile to the village became one of the stories that made Titus Manlius Torquatus famous. The popular tribune Marcus Pomponius brought Imperiosus to trial for mistreating his son. Upon learning of this, Titus Manlius returned to Rome and came home to Pomponius. Finding himself alone with the tribune, the young man put a dagger to his throat and ordered him to stop the trial against his father. The story became public, and Manlius earned respect for his loyalty to his stern father. Following this, the young Titus Manlius was chosen as one of the military tribunes. In the 361st year before Christ, the Romans were at war with the invading Gauls. For the war, the Romans chose the dictator Titus Quinctius Pennus. A bridge came between the armies. One day, a mighty Gaulish warrior came onto the bridge and began to challenge the Romans to a duel. Manlius decided to answer the challenge. Before entering the duel, the young warrior got the consent of the dictator Quinctius. This is a very important part in the stories of Roman heroes. Also, according to Livy, another hero, Marcus Valerius Corvus, would act a decade and a half later. In his story, Titus Livius contrasts the restraint of Manlius with the self-confidence of the Gallic warrior. The Roman was clad in modest armor, the Gaul in elaborate and motley attire. Unlike Manlius, Gaul warrior boasted of his bravery and even showed the Romans language. Titus Manlius won the victory and then tore off as a trophy neck mane of the enemy and put it on himself. Thus he earned a nickname that became part of the family name of his descendants, Torquatus. The dictator rewarded the young victorious warrior with a golden wreath. 8 years later, Titus Manlius Torquatus was appointed dictator for the war with the Etruscan city of Syr. After another 4 years, he was again chosen dictator for consular elections. That year Manlius proclaimed Marcus Valerius Corvus as one of the consuls, who in that year repeated his feat of defeating a Gallic warrior in single combat. In the 340th year of Christ began the Second Latin War, where Rome was opposed by communities of related Latin peoples. Manlius was elected one of the consuls. The communities of the Latins had previously been allies of Rome, and their units had fought alongside the Romans. Therefore, each side was well aware of the tactics of the enemy. Manlius, as consul, forbade entering into any skirmishes with the enemy. The description of the campaign of Manlius against the Latin Union has become one of the most famous subjects of Titus Livius' history. In its dramatization, it rises to a real tragedy. The son of the consul Titus Manlius commanded a cavalry turma, a detachment of 30 horsemen. While scouting, the young officer found himself near an advanced detachment from Tusculus, one of the cities of the Latin Union. The Tusculan cavalrymen were commanded by a young aristocrat named Geminus Messius. The two commanders recognized each other and got into an altercation. Messius offered Manlius the younger a duel. The opponents clashed in front of their squads, and Manlius first threw Messius off his horse and then killed him. The consul's son returned to the camp looking triumphant and brought the captured armor to his father's tent as a trophy. Manlius turned away from his son and reminded him that he had given strict orders not to engage in battle. Then Titus Livius put in the mouth of the consul a long monologue with reproaches to his son, who undermined the army obedience. Manlius said that he was faced with a choice of whom to prefer, the family, or the state. And now, to cement the consul's sacred authority in war, he must execute his son. In essence, the commander was giving his son the opportunity to face death with dignity and thus mitigate the consequences of violating the order. On Manlius' order, his son was tied to a pole and then beheaded with a blow of an axe. After the execution, the warriors covered the body of Manlius Jr. with the armor obtained in the duel and burned it. Soon Torquatus and the second consul Decius gave the enemy a battle near Vesuvius. Livius cites another legend. According to a prophetic dream, which allegedly saw both consuls, one of the generals must sacrifice himself. Manlius and Decius decided that will sacrifice himself, whose wing will retreat. The first to retreat was the left flank of Decius. Consul rushed into battle and was killed in a hail of arrows. In the end, the Romans were victorious. Both consuls received equal glory, Decius for his sacrifice, Manlius for his skill as a commander. Following the victory at Vesuvius, Manlius gave another battle to the united army of Latins and Volsci near Tryphena. About this battle did not make the same legends. Sources reported the victory and the conclusion of treaties with the defeated Latins. The rebellious communities lost some of their lands, which they turned over to Roman colonists. The Campanian communities that remained loyal to Rome were, on the contrary, rewarded. Titus Livius describes Torquatus' return to Rome. Allegedly, the victor was greeted only by elderly Romans, because the youth had not forgotten the execution of his son. After this, Titus Manlius Torquatus resigned as consul and transferred military power to an appointed dictator. Livius wrote that many Romans shunned Manlius. The story of his son's execution shocked many. More glorified commander did not participate in public life. Only once he, as dictator, organized the election of officials. As with other generals of the early republic, the personality of Manlius is surrounded by many myths. Undoubtedly, he was a brave warrior and commander. But in the story of the execution of his son, the legend can no longer be separated from reality. In the Roman Empire, Manlius was popular as one of the exemplary politicians and generals of the glorious past. And the story of Manlius the Younger and his execution became popular in European painting.